So, what is the perfect breathing technique when it comes to singing? You see, there will be two kinds of people who will be watching this video. Either number one, you're a beginner, and most likely we have heard of people giving advice that in singing, the most important aspect is the breathing, and you have to learn how to breathe well first before you can sing well. Or either that, you are someone who's more advanced and you saw the title of this video, and all along throughout the process that you have been learning how to breathe properly for singing, you have been confused because you have heard so many different ideas on what is the proper way to breathe and to support, and hence you look into this video and you want to figure out what is the perfect breathing technique that I think exists when it comes to singing. Because by the end of this video, you will understand the most powerful way to breathe when it comes to singing. And when you do understand and apply this breathing technique into your own singing, you realize that any other breathing technique is not nearly as powerful and as efficient as the one that I'm about to share with you. Hey, it's JJ here, and if this is your first time watching my videos, I help singers like you unlock your high notes fast by showing you exactly how you can access your high complete mixed voice vocal placement. So if that sounds like you, go ahead, hit the subscribe button below now, and let's get started. Now, most of you'll be along the journey that I'm about to describe to you. You see, when you first begin learning how to sing, chances are you are taught that the best way to breathe is called the diaphragmatic breathing. Exactly what does it mean? It simply means allow the air to go deep into your body, right here around your stomach area, and allow your stomach to be pushed outwards so that the air can go deep into your stomach instead of being shallow on the chest. And this will be called the chest breathing, and we are advised most of the time to not breathe in this manner, because then you'll be too shallow and then we'll not be able to support our sound afterwards. So far, does it make sense? And afterwards, if you learn about breathing a bit deeper, you also realize that allowing yourself to execute the diaphragmatic breathing is not only about allowing your stomach to be pushed outwards, but also you learn that your sides have to move outwards. Your sides have to be expanding outwards as well in order to take in more air and fuller intake of air. Does that all sound familiar to you? Now, personally, I disagree with all those methods for three very good reasons, which I'll share in a moment. But first, I want to give it to you straight and tell you what I believe is the best way to breathe when it comes to singing. Now, I believe that the perfect way to breathe is actually to breathe into the back. Before some of you click away now because you think that you know what I'm about to say next, or you're thinking, why do I need to breathe into my back when I can just breathe into my front and my sides? Because obviously, if you have tried breathing into your back before, it is way harder to execute than breathing diaphragmatically into your front and your sides. You see, breathing into the back, the upper back and the lower back, is going to be challenging at first because it is going to be a new muscular coordination that you have to get used to. But in the long run, breathing into the back is going to give you so much benefits. And when you do understand these three reasons why breathing into the back is just so much more powerful and useful than breathing in the front, than breathing into the front or the sides, you want to make this switch immediately. Yes, you heard that right. You literally want to make that switch right now, because you also realize that breathing into your front might be the very reason that's causing your voice to get worse instead of getting better. Now, reason number one why breathing into the back is more useful is because, first of all, breathing into the back, it is a breathing technique used by the Italians when they are performing classical singing and opera singing in the past. Because if you have studied classical singing before, you would have realized that in the past, the gold standard when it comes to breathing is almost never into the front and the sides, but rather into the back. And one of the greatest tenor in the 20th century, Enrico Caruso, has said this before, that he breathes into the back instead of the front. And more importantly, if you understand how the ladies used to sing classical singing, in the past, they used to wear this metal vest such that it covers their entire front torso. And think about it this way, it is a very stiff metal casing that wraps them tightly from the front. If that's the case, how then will they be able to breathe into the front? Because the metal casing will be blocking off and preventing their stomach from being pushed outwards. The only way to breathing air using the diaphragmatic breathing is to actually allow the air to go to the back. More specifically, what you're doing is now you're allowing the air to go deep into your body, but instead of displacing the organs you have in front, you're actually allowing your air to go backwards and displacing the muscles in your lower back and your upper back as well. Now, why do you think that in the past, the old school way of teaching, the proper Italian classical singing, why do you think that they teach singers to sing this way? For very good reasons, because we understand that in the past, there is no amplifications, there is no mic, no speakers. They have to be able to project their voice such that even the last audience in the theatre can hear them clearly. One of the way that they are able to do it is by using more nasal resonance, but more importantly, when it comes to breathing, they need more air to sustain those notes. And if you understand classical music, sometimes there are very long phrases that doesn't allow you to actually take a breath in between, unlike a lot of pop songs today. Does that make sense? And therefore, in order to take in the most amount of air in the most efficient way, they have to be breathing into the back instead of the front and the sides. So if that was actually the original way that the most elite Italian classical singers are being taught, why is it that today we have changed things and instead try to breathe into the front and the sides? It is easier, but at the same time, it also becomes harder for us to control, because if you understand this, our back muscles, our backbone, the muscles on our back, it is stronger. It actually allows us to support better, in a sense, later on when we are singing. But if you were to breathe into the front, because of how soft the organs are at the front and how your abs are not as strong and as sturdy as your backbone and your lower back and your upper back muscles, later on when you go to support the sound, you realize that your sound is actually less stable if you were to breathe into the front instead of the back. Which leads me to my second point, and that is the diaphragmatic breathing to the front and to the sides. It might not work specifically for a group of people. Here's what I mean. Now, I want you to follow along with me and try this experiment together. This is going to be a real mind-blowing experiment. And when you do try this experiment, you'll realize that breathing into the front is actually more detrimental to your singing than it helps your singing. The thing that we want to find out here is the distance between your lowest ribcage bone and your hip bone. Now, how does this work? Step number 1, I want you to take your fingers and put it across your ribs. You done that? Now run your finger down and down your hips until, okay, really poke it, dig it in, dig your fingers into your ribcage, okay, and feel the lowest rib cage bone. Now, once you have done that, I want you to take your other hand and put it over at a spot that this hand is at, and allow this hand to be free, and don't move this hand. Now, step number 2, what we want to do is we want to find out what is the level, where's the position of our hip bone, and the hip bone is much simpler to identify. So go ahead, take your hand and put it on your hip bone. You done that? Great. I want you to estimate the distance between your lowest ribcage bone and your hip bone. And I want you, if you have a ruler, take the ruler and measure that distance now. You done that? Great. Let me show you what is my distance. Now, this is literally the distance between my lowest ribcage and my hip bone. I don't have a ruler with me now, but this is at best 3 cm. See, here's what's interesting. Because naturally, with my bone structure, I have a larger ribcage, I have bigger bones. As a result, when I have a bigger ribcage and when I have a bigger hip bone, because the distance between them is so little, it also tells me that the space I have here is smaller. As a result, what happens if you have a smaller space here? When you try to breathe in front, number one, you will feel more tight in front. And when you feel too tight in front, it eventually becomes uncomfortable. But guess what? I personally have to switch to the back because our back are equal. So go ahead now, comment down below what is the distance between your lowest ribcage bone and your hip bone. If it's as little as 3 cm like mine, then you know that breathing into the front is going to be detrimental to you. It gets worse than this, because the smaller the distance, the smaller the space available. And as a result, if let's say someone with a distance of 10 cm, if they were to breathe into the front, they have a lot of space. So if let's pretend that me and another person with 10 cm space, if we are both breathing in the same amount of air, by the time I feel tight in front, he or she still feels relaxed. And therefore that person can breathe into the front and he or she will still feel a certain level of tolerable tension here. Now, the further danger lies here, where if you can understand this, as we take up enough space here, right above your top abs, there's this part here. It is somewhere in between your chest and your abs. That is what I call the solar plexus. Now, if you try breathing a lot now, try to take in a lot of air and allow all the air to settle in front. Do you start to feel your solar plexus locking up? Initially, when you're first taking some air, you wouldn't feel it tightening. But towards the end, as you max out your capacity at the front, you start to feel that your solar plexus, you start to feel that this part starts to tighten up. And what's interesting is we don't want this solar plexus to tighten up, because when we do, it causes us, our entire body, to tense up. That's number one, and we don't want to do that when it comes to singing. Number two, because of this locking of the solar plexus, we all know this, we all know that in order to sing well, we need to have a constant stream of airflow through our vocal cords as we sing. But because of the locking up of the solar plexus, it is actually going to make the rate of airflow irregular. And when the rate of flow of air is irregular, it is going to affect how well your vocal cords vibrate. And if there is too much air, it is going to cause your vocal cords to come apart and your voice is going to break. And if there's too little air, then your vocal cords will not be able to vibrate efficiently and you will sound too weak. And if we are also talking about things like doing a vibrato, guess what? Locking up your solar plexus because of the irregular stream of flow of air now, what then happens is your vibrato is not consistent. You're gonna get a really weird sounding vibrato that is not consistent because of the inconsistent flow of air. Does that make sense? So far, the first two reasons are really practical reasons why breathing into the back is so much more useful and powerful than breathing into the front or the sides. Now, the last and final reason, it is the one of the most, if you're a lady here, you have to listen up, because this tip is going to be so valuable to you. Because look, when you're forced to breathe a lot of air into your front, what happens is on the stage, you look like you have a huge stomach. And the truth is, if you're a lady and you're performing, you're on the stage and you're singing in a beautiful dress or something more revealing, you don't want people to think that you look fat when you're not actually fat, when it is actually because of the air that's causing you to look fat. Does that make sense? And great singers, they know that. They know the cost of ruining their image by breathing everything into the front and making their stomach look so big on the stage. So if you actually notice, great singers, they don't actually breathe all into the front. Let's take a look at what I mean.
Inspired times again. I wanna love me the way that you love me. Ooh, for all of my pretty and all of my ugly too. I love to see me from your point of view.
So you can see those great singers. They didn't exactly breathe into the front. If else you'll see that their stomach is coming out, but they're not. Hence, they have to be breathing into someone else. They have to be breathing into some other places, which is not the front. It has to be the back. And therefore, from an aesthetic point of view, breathing into the back, because of how people can't really see your back moving and no one is concerned with how your back looks like, you are gonna get away by maintaining a good image while singing on stage without looking fat. Does that make sense? Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you've watched up to this point of the video, I want to point out to you something else that's almost be mind-blowing to you if you've been learning singing for a while now. Do you remember at the beginning, I said this? I said that usually when we first started learning how to sing, how to breathe when it comes to singing, we are told not to use chest breathing and to breathe everything into our diaphragm. Sounds familiar? Now, you see, the truth is this. Let's take a look again at those two singers, and I want you to notice what happens to their shoulders as they are breathing.
And I'll rise up, I like the waves, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. I wanna love me the way that you love me. Ooh, for all of my pretty and all of my ugly too. I love to see me from your point of view.
Now, here's what's interesting. Do you notice that for those singers, they are kinda doing what I call chest breathing? When they are breathing in, they are allowing their chest and their shoulders to rise up as they breathe in. Now that you have noticed this, it is really gonna confuse you. Literally every single vocal coaches are telling me to not breathing using chest breathing, but to use diaphragmatic breathing. But why are those great singers actually disobeying the rules and breathing with chest breathing? You see, this is where things get interesting. If you still haven't realized, most of the advices that vocal coaches are teaching. Another example would be narrowing your mouth, doing a instead of a vowel modification. Do you realize that when singers sing on a all the singers that we love, great singers, they don't modify their vowels to make it a at a high note. They keep it wide open on a when they are singing. Do you realize that a lot of things that vocal coaches they are teaching simply goes against what great singers are doing? Now, that is a problem I personally have with a lot of conventional vocal advices, because they don't align with what the best singers are doing. And coming back to this idea of allowing the shoulders and chest to rise up. Now, here's the truth. When you have reached a point where your vocal cords are just so efficient and your high placement, you have accessed it and you have strengthened it so hard, what then happens is the airflow, it kind of become natural. In fact, those singers, the reason why they can breathe some air into their chest is because we all know that chest breathing is a shallow form of breathing. It allows us to take in less air. But it is not a problem for those singers because they don't need so much air. Because here's the truth, like I've said many times before, the main issue why you can't sing high notes is because your placement is too low. You don't have a strong high placement that you've accessed. Number two, your vocal cords, they're not efficient. As long as you don't meet the criteria of these two things, your air is secondary. But what most people will do is they will not focus on their high placement. They will start focusing on the breathing. They will think that all their problem is because of what vocal coach says. You're not supporting enough. You're not breathing in enough air, which is utterly nonsense for 99% of people who can't sing high notes well. The main reason, like I've said, usually has got to do with your high placement. You haven't accessed your high placement, your high complete mixed voice vocal placement, and you haven't strengthened it. Because what's interesting is where you actually have accessed your high placement and where you have strengthened it, you realize that breathing is actually not important. What do I mean? Because when you're that good with your placement, you need to use less air. When your entire system, your vocal cords, your placement, when they become efficient, guess what? You need to use less air now. And when you use less air, even if you do shallow chest breathing, you have less air. But it's fine because you don't even need that much air to begin with. Does that make sense? And what's also interesting is, understand that even though they are allowing their shoulders and chest to rise up, the truth is this, they are breathing in both into their back and into their chest. So it's still a good amount of distribution. Because the truth is, when you breathe really fast, it's a very natural motion. And natural singers, they just have everything natural. From their placement is a natural high placement, their vocal cords vibrating, the efficiency is a natural efficiency, which of course is trained. Both are trained over time since they were kids. And likewise, their breathing, they're not taught to how to breathe, they just breathe naturally. When you're a kid, no one tells you, oh, you have to breathe into the front, into your stomach. No one does that. They just do what feels natural to them, and hence that's why they are called naturally born talented singers. Everything they do is natural. And as a result, when they sing, it sounds natural. It doesn't sound artificial. It sounds real and raw, and that is what allows them to connect with us. Does that make sense? Now, I hope this video gave you a clear idea on exactly what is the best way to breathe when it comes to singing. So stop trying to breathe into your front or side and start thinking about how can I breathe into my lower back and my upper back, the entire back region. Because when you're able to so-called breathe into the back, then you realize that your high notes is going to become more stable in the long run. And most importantly, you look good on the stage because now your stomach is not going to come out anymore, or maybe just a little bit. Hey, if you like what you have seen in this video, go ahead, hit the like button below and subscribe, because more awesome videos like this one is going to be coming your way. Hey, I've got to go now, and I'll catch you in another video.